Hi, I'm Mike Gilliam, and this is A Slice of New York. We begin the new year with an old friend, Emmy-winning journalist, author, activist, and podcaster Carol Jenkins, who is beyond doubt part of the fabric of New York. For more than 50 years, Carol has worked to make our city great. She was a pioneering African-American television news anchor and reporter at WNBC-TV for nearly 25 years. Here at CUNY TV, Carol hosts the interview show Black America, which has been nominated for multiple Emmys and is now in its 10th season. She has also co-authored a book with her daughter, Black Titan, A.G. Gaston, and the Making of a Black Millionaire. Carol has championed many other causes, including being the founding president of the Women's Media Center. She invited us on a tour of her neighborhood, giving us a chance to catch up on what she's been up to lately. Carol, thanks for having us in.
Oh my goodness, I'm so glad you're here, Mike. Mike, welcome to Hamilton Heights.
Thank you very much.
We're facing the family wall, right? You know, so that sort of is the center of everything that we do here. Everything is sort of family. That's why I'm here. I moved in because my kids were in this building.
In the same building.
In the same
That's
building.
Great.
So the kids come up and downstairs in their pajamas and, you know, so I have them up on the wall.
Talk to me about that first picture there.
Oh.
That one strikes me.
If you could imagine when they were that young, they went out for Christmas one year and surprised me. Actually went to a photo studio, got a picture made, and presented that to me. So that was really like the first, you know, they're growing up.
Wow,
kind of,
that must be dear to your heart, though.
I know. And, you know, they're so cute. The
others are of the three grandchildren. Carol has always kept family close, including daughter Elizabeth, who often accompanied her to work at WNBC-TV.
Actually, when I was anchoring the news, would sit under the anchor desk.
Really?
And yes, my mother, who was watching, she would tell me, you better tell Elizabeth to scoot down. I see her puffs, so.
Carol's work also played a major role in her adoption of son Mike, who she met at Hale House while doing a story on Mother Hale, who cared for children whose mothers could not care for them for various reasons, including substance abuse.
Mother Hale says to one of her assistants, go up and get Mikey. And she brings down this beautiful, beautiful child, puts him in my lap. And I fell in love instantly and went back to visit him after we did the story and then brought him home. And so,
wow.
So that was, and then when I actually had to take him to work first. And when I got there, a friend of ours, Sue Iger, said, who is this child and where are his diapers? And I said, oh, diapers. And she had to go out and buy diapers.
No.
I was like.
And he's how old now?
40. Don't tell anybody that.
Okay.
Well,
That is great. Carol's neighborhood is rich in history, including the nearby Ralph Ellison Plaza and statue at 150th and Riverside. It honors Ellison, a black writer who wrote Invisible Man. It delves into the struggles of a young African-American man in a hostile society. It won a National Book Award in 1953. Residents came together along with sculptor Elizabeth Catlett to raise funds and erect the monument, which features a cutout of a man inspired by the book. Dale Dobson's mother, Anne, was instrumental.
We were lucky. There was a lot of consensus. There was no inner fighting. We did it in record time, I think about 5 years, which is like really fast.
But there's much more to Carol's neighborhood.
on this block right here, first is the Caribbean restaurant. And then when we get into the next, there's Japanese, there's, you know, everything that you could conceivably want and really reflective of the people who live here.
Well, let's get coffee.
Okay, we're gonna go to the Chipped Cup.
This is the Chipped Cup, huh?
This is the Chipped Cup.
Okay.
Welcome
So this is your coffee spot, huh?
I love coming here, and the coffee is wonderful, and so are the treats. Can I get a latte
Absolutely.
to
For your
go?
to
To go, I think. Should we take it back? Or?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Do you have a cup of Earl Grey? Is it
Yes,
safe
sure
to
do.
say that here?
Absolutely.
Okay. Carol is still a cutting-edge journalist. For the last 3 years, she's hosted a podcast called The Invisible American.
That people really do not understand that there are 13 million children in the United States who are living in poverty. Many of them do not have homes. They are food insecure. They don't really know where they're sleeping next. And so we've, started this and we've interviewed not only survivors of childhood poverty, but the experts. So we're trying to find a way of ending child poverty.
Speaking of children, remember that little girl who sat under the desk while her mother anchored the television news? Well, she's grown now.
She's, the best mother I ever could have dreamed of. And she is a person who puts her money where her mouth is, who lives her life in a way that really embodies caretaking and caregiving in a way that I think is very rare amongst most of the human beings I've seen. I've watched her care for her mother as she was transitioning. I've watched her care for many different friends as they have transitioned.
Hey, the older I get, it's like, no more of this transitioning, please.
I know. And I've watched her care for my children and my partner and all of these people in her life, and I think that will be your greatest legacy.
Thank you.
We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll talk more with Carol about her amazing life and career. I'm Mike Gilliam, and this is A Slice of New York. Welcome back. I'm Mike Gilliam, and this is A Slice of New York. Carol Jenkins has been a fixture on local TV for years. Carol, let's talk a little bit about your illustrious career. How did it all get started?
Oh my goodness, how did it all get started? Well, I am a journalism baby. Both of my father and my stepfather were in the news business. My biological dad was a reporter for the Black Press as well as a Tuskegee Airman. My stepfather published a magazine during World War II. So it was sort of in the blood. However, they were both print, both black press. I, of course, wanted to do television. And this is after graduating from college and graduate school in something else. I was a speech pathologist. I decided that I wanted to become a reporter. And my mother gave me she said, this is the last money we're giving you to go back to school, to take some journalism classes. And I went to NYU and did it, and then it started from there. I started working in the editorial department at CBS. I was the script girl, and I would run down the hallway with my boss's script. He was, the editorial director, about to issue. Remember those?
The person
days?
they called out, hey, copy?
Right, exactly. And I would run down the hall. That was my first job in the business. And then, then started at Channel 9. And
Now, you hosted a show at Channel 9, correct?
I did. Ellie Guggenheimer, who was a matriarch of New York City, was big in philanthropy. She and I hosted a show called Straight Talk, which was actually the first daily public affairs show hosted by two women, in the television business. So, and one of our broadcasts was the ABCs of Congress, Bella Abzug, Herman Baggio, and Shirley Chisholm. They had just started out. So we're talking ancient history. Mike is a baby, by the way, in this
Hardly.
in this whole news business.
That's very interesting. And then from there, it was on to WNBC. And
Right.
You spent many years working at WNBC. In fact, I remember you were one of the first people I met out in the field, and you were so kind to me.
I'm so glad that you have that memory, because those was pretty cutthroat days in the news business. If you got back to the newsroom and you didn't have the best interview, the top story, the best whatever, you were in deep trouble. That was.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm glad we had cordial interaction.
Those were the days where they might push your mic out of the way.
I know. I mean, But those were the days when news was really respected. As you know, you and I have talked about the degradation of reporting and of the news as it exists today. That I have not, watched any news since the election of 2024.
Yeah.
So
Things have changed.
things have
absolutely.
changed.
Well, talk to me a little bit about when you were at WNBC. What sticks out as like maybe your favorite story or the most impactful story that you worked on?
Well, I have two stories that most people remember. One is that I actually got to go to South Africa when Nelson Mandela was released from prison. And so that was a huge, huge, life-altering experience for me. 27 years in prison. Thousands, hundreds of thousands of black South Africans coming out into the streets and into the stadiums to welcome him home. I remember being outside of his house in Soweto, this little tiny house. He stepped out early in the morning as the school children were walking by. To me, that's one of the images that, that I will never, ever forget. That they really had no idea, these school children skipping along in their uniforms, that the man standing in his front yard looking at them had spent 27 years in prison working, for their equality. The other story is a fun story, and that's that I got to interview Reggie Jackson in his underwear in the when women were finally allowed, in the, changing rooms of the athletic places. So, which was another big story. And the story of that cropped to make it look as if I were interviewing him in the complete nude, and with the headline of "Nothing but the bare facts, ma'am," ran in the newspapers after. But that was the fun story.
That's really scandalous.
I know. I know. From the sacred to the scandalous, right?
You were a pioneer as far as African-American women anchoring and reporting when you were at Channel 4. What was that like? And do you think we've come far enough now?
I would say we have tremendous breakthroughs. We've had black women participating in the debates now, the presidential debates, anchoring. I think, I cry a bit for the news industry totally, because belief in the work that you and I did or do, belief in that has declined. We're not trusted as much, just generally speaking. So as black women, as black men participate, and people of color participate, in larger ways, it's all sort of, less than you would have expected it to be. They're not, as we come in now, we're not coming in at the top of our game. I think we're coming in, the same thing with the Supreme Court and Congress, all of the institutions that, you and I, as we were working as street reporters, understood to be the highest echelon, the most believed and trusted. And I think that confidence in all of that has been degraded. So, there are changes. So.
Yeah, it's interesting now. It doesn't seem as though anything has to be verified as truth. We always had to verify things and make sure that things were accurate, but that's kind of out the window with social media.
I know. You remember what our bosses would take us through, just to make sure. Are you sure? How many people did you talk to? Can you, verify it before we put this on our air? But most of what we're watching now on cable is opinion anyway. The analysts or whatever are there. And, that's a respected format, to have a various and vast selection of people giving their opinions about what has happened that day. But separating it from the fact has been the difficulty. And I think the American public is not used to doing that. And so, therefore, we have some really misinformation issues that have to be dealt with.
How do you think it gets dealt with? How do we get back on track?
Well, I think because many of the people that I know have stopped watching, stopped reading, and for one reason or another discontinued their subscriptions, to once respected publications. I think that this is it. This is the reshaping of the news industry in America. And I think what will happen is, I'm sure you do it, I curate the information that I get now.
Right.
And less is it from the well-established, what used to be our homes of journalism. And it's more Substack, it's more people who have podcasts, who are people that you trust, which is the basis of it, as opposed to anybody who says anything in a news program should be evaluated equally. So I think this is the new phase where you must curate your information to make sure that the person delivering it can be trusted. Not that I'm saying that they say what you want to hear.
Right, because
You
that
know.
leads to the silo situation.
That's what got us.
Right.
Right? But that you have confidence that the person delivering it understands what's happening and can give a just and fair reading of it.
Let's talk about the early days. You started out in rural Alabama.
Oh, you're talking really, really early days.
Yes.
Yeah, I am from Lowndes County, Alabama, from a farm in Lowndes County. My grandfather and grandmother were farmers, milking cows and growing cotton and all of that. My mother was one of 15 children. There were 9 girls and 6 boys, and I do a lot of equality feminist work. But I always have to say the very first feminist in our family was my grandfather, who sent all 9 of his daughters to college. And we're talking about the 1920s, 30s, 40s, that he managed to get them all into great black schools to get a college education. Most of them became teachers. The boys stayed on the farm and worked the farm.
You had to have the labor.
Right, exactly. But that was it, Lowndes County, Alabama. And in remembering, I always tell my kids, just to make them feel bad, that I didn't have a pair of shoes, or running water until whatever, And they're like, no, that can't possibly be true. But that is, that arc of what could happen in America, that Lowndes County on a rural farm outside of Montgomery, Alabama, that you could have 15 children, and the produce of that, not only what we grew, but that we delivered, doctors and lawyers and writers, a reporter, all of that came out of that Alabama soil, as I like to refer to it, that was a possibility, that movement was a possibility.
The civil rights movement actually touched your life too while you were in Alabama. Let's talk a little bit about that and how all of the Martin Luther King Jr. things and the marches from Alabama happened right in that same general area, right?
Right. Well, that farm where I was born was the 3rd stop on the march from Selma to Montgomery, with John Lewis and Martin Luther King. They slept on our front lawn. But I have an uncle, and my daughter and I wrote a book about him called Black Titan. The making of a black American millionaire. So A.G. Gaston was the grandchild of slaves. His mother was a cook for wealthy Alabama families in Birmingham. And he started as a miner, as in coal mining,
right,
iron mining, and wound up creating a vertical business in Alabama that included, he started selling insurance, to his colleagues, coal miners, and then turned that into a burial industry, opened a business college, and ultimately a motel, a bank, all of that. As we write the book, from birth to death, he created all of those businesses. One of the recent mayors said that it was my aunt and uncle who really made the black middle class, not only in Alabama, because all of these people had work and training, but my aunt used to train business people for the U.S. government. We're talking about, 30s, 40s, 50s, et cetera. At any rate, the A.G. Gaston Motel was where Martin Luther King stayed when he was integrating the department stores. Those were the days of the dogs. And it was my uncle who actually bailed Martin Luther King out of jail when he was writing that infamous letter.
That's fascinating.
And the inside story is that he did not want to come out. But, my uncle said, no, I'm sorry, the President of the United States has said, you have to come out. It probably would have been better for the movement for him to stay there, but also much more dangerous. So we have that kind of activity, civil rights. I mean, the fact that my family members could not vote, when I was growing up, was an idea that, well, the whole idea of voting was so remote, but the fact that my family could not vote. Also, all of my cousins were involved in the sit-ins and whatever, and I was in college at Boston University doing more marching in the streets than actually sitting in classrooms. But
There's got to be a gut punch, though, now to see people play with the vote.
oh my goodness, can you imagine? Well, it's a retrenchment in understanding what, I mean, everything. That vote was so recent. The fact that you're talking about 60s, 70s, that black people could actually vote in so many parts of this country, that was new. The fact that women could get credit cards is another piece of the equality that's virtually like yesterday. We're a country that hasn't been historically inviting and inclusive. That fight has had to go on forever, and is still going on. So we have to rework. We have to refight. That equal voting rights.
The old battles. Okay, we're going to take a short break now. And when we come back, we'll talk about all of the, quote, good works that Carol's been up to in addition to her journalism. We're talking to Carol Jenkins, and this is A Slice of New York. This is A Slice of New York. We're talking to journalist, author, and activist Carol Jenkins. Carol, your activism has been an important part of your life story. Let's talk a little bit about some of that. One of the things you were involved in is the Women's Media Center. Tell me about it. What is it?
Well, formed about 20 years ago. I was the founding president of it, but we had some pretty heavy-duty co-founders, Gloria Steinem, Jane Fonda, Robin Morgan, who decided that, and this was 20 years ago, that the progress that had been made by women in the news media was insufficient and something had to be done. Mm-hmm. So they created a nonprofit that would uplift women in the media as journalists, and also the content, stories that were about women, because in each of those instances there were amazing discrepancies of participation. So we started, it's still going on, and every year they give out the Carol Jenkins Media Award. Is my, I love to go back to see. One of the things that we did was create progressive women's voices, where we actually trained women who would have a public stance in how to handle the media. And we have some extraordinary, Pramila Jayapal, who's in Congress, was one in our first class, Maria Teresa Kumar, a Voto Latino, Fatima Goss-Graves, who runs the Women's Law Center. We were able to give them a basic understanding of what it took to make their way, with their voices, within the media in the United States and globally. Mm-hmm. So we did that. We do research every year on the status of women, women of color in the media, and we make sure that there's a calculation and understanding of how women are being treated. As Gloria always used to say, the reason we're concentrating on the media is because if you're not in the media, you're not in the history books. And so, as we well know, that so many of our children, even now grandchildren, can pick up history books and will not find any accomplishments or participation by women because they were invisible. So the Women's Media Center is a terrific organization, still doing tremendous, unfortunately needed still to make sure that women are moving up the ranks and staying in the ranks of executive positions, as well as anchoring and reporting in every aspect of the media.
Now, there are some out there who would say none of this sort of thing is needed any longer. Everybody's equal. What do you say to that?
No, I think you'll find that what's happening is that women have made it up and into superior executive positions, and as they leave, they are being replaced by men. And if you just take a look at any of your journalism concentrating on media, you will find so-and-so, a wonderful black executive who is the president of so-and-so is leaving, and who's replacing her? Probably a white man. Maybe a white woman, but probably a white man. So I think that what we have to understand is that holding on to these gains, just as we were talking earlier about a simple thing but essential thing like voting,
right,
that we have to fight for that again. I think that we have to just make sure that organizations like the Women's Media Center, hold the country accountable, to what's happening.
You've done a lot of work in Africa with
Amref Health Africa. It's the largest African health organization on the continent. We work in about 35 countries, doing things like training health workers and working on vaccines. We're working on Mpox now, which is, after COVID, it's still a problem. HIV and AIDS, still a problem. On a continent like Africa, where you still have millions of people who are infected and still need to be cared for. So it's a passion of mine, and I have. It's an organization that was started by 3 doctors who taught themselves how to fly. It was originally known as the Flying Doctors. Now it's Amref Health Africa.
We could go on and on for hours here, but we don't have that kind of time. But I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about your memoir.
My memoir?
Yeah.
I mean, am I writing it?
Yes.
I am. I
Okay.
am. So it's about the family, not only the biological family that I'm lucky to grow up in, but the family of people that I've interviewed, that I've encountered, in my work. And so I'm working on it, but not seriously enough and not hard enough, but expected in 2026.
Okay. We'll be waiting for that, absolutely. Okay, that'll have to be the last word. I want to thank our guest and friend Carol Jenkins for sharing her career and life stories with us. It's all inspiring. Just a fantastic career and a life well lived. Carol, thank you. And thank you for joining us. I'm Mike Gilliam. We'll see you next time on A Slice of New York.